Top lane. The only lane that matters. The place where gods rival each other, and only the manliest of men emerge victorious. Or at least that's how it's supposed to go. Aside from random ganks from deplorable jungle mains that don't respect the sanctity of top, there's one other beast that has ruined this lane for as long as I can remember. Those that spit in the face of honor by cowardly poking you from a mile away, forcing you to sit and watch your minions die under your tower. Ranged champions. I'm talking about you little shit. Nothing's more annoying than picking an honorable tank or bruiser just to be backed into your tower, scraping together a little bit of CS, and begging your jungle for a gank.
Squidward? Squidward, is that you?
A summoner has disconnected.
Surviving on a hope that you may be relevant mid to late game. While any ranged shitter can apply some pressure if they know what they're doing, there's a few consistent champions that ruin top lane, and whose players likely don't have a solid father figure in their life. Jace, Teemo, Vayne, and they all have something in common: their role. No, not top lane, this one. If you don't know, on the client, every champion has 2 roles assigned to them. And all the aforementioned nuisances have Marksmen in common. This made me wonder, which Marksmen make you want to uninstall the game, and which are kinda shit in the top lane. I can't cover all Marksmen in League in one video, and get it done in a reasonable time. So I'm gonna break it down into a series. And at the same time, I don't want to start off with the standard mouth-breathing range champs top. I want to do something different. So I decided to go with everyone's favorite gay pirate couple, also known as the average pirate couple, since I actually have some experience playing them. But before I jump into the gameplay, I want to talk about their lore. Don't worry, I won't go all Necrid on you, and I'll leave a timestamp so you can skip ahead if you don't like lore. Twisted Fate grew up in a traveling river group, and was taught how to properly play a card game or two, and how to read his opponents. After swindling one too many people, his camp was attacked in the dead of night, and he fled. Banished by his nomadic tribe, Twisted Fate found loose change in Malcolm Graves in a gambling hall, a man that grew up learning to steal and fight in the alleys of Bilgewater. The two set out to be a lucrative crime duo until a little backstabbing got Graves put in jail. But a dead pirate king and an undead ghost king later, the two are thick as thieves again. Well, a little closer than that. Alright, now that that little bit of story is out of the way, let's see how these guys fare in top lane. I'm gonna start with Twisted Fate. For the sake of considering him a marksman, I'll be covering an on-hit build, but I played a game of APTF top, and I enjoyed that a lot more. Either way, he still counts as a marksman. Let's look at his abilities. TF's passive gives you a little slot machine every time you kill something, giving you 1 to 6 extra gold every time. If you have crit chance built, you have a chance to have 2 rolled.
Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it!
His Q is the 3 throwing cards that do pretty much no damage when you go AD, even though it has AD scaling. It's technically something. TF's W, pick a card, does just that. You have to choose between a blue card that does more damage, gives you mana, a red card that does less damage but slows in an AoE, or a yellow card that stuns but does the least amount of damage. That stun sets up his E, which is an on-hit effect every 4 autos. And I hope you know what TF's ult does. He's really only got 2 abilities that matter in lane, his E and his W. TF's E gives you more attack speed per point in it, so I prefer maxing that one out. And then his W is a fancy empowered auto that can reset his attack timer. Mana and killing minions shouldn't be that much of an issue, and it gives you plenty of setup for kills or running away. The duration of the stun gets longer the more points in W, so I like maxing it second. You can put a point into his Q if you need to try to last hit from afar, but it does next to 0 damage with just 1 point in it, so I like to alternate between E and W. When it comes to actually laning with TF, it's a little rough. Without levels and items, you do almost no damage, and that means without ganks, you likely won't get a kill for a while. Unless your opponent gets greedy and tries to dive you. I almost always rushed Vamp Scepter just to have some sustain, and it'll lead you nicely into Bork, and I feel like that's essential. People may underestimate what you're capable of, so don't be too scared to limit test and get some poke off if you really want to try out top lane Twisted Fate. For sums on TF, I never took TP, since he has one built into his ult. I also thought if I'm gonna be a bitch playing a ranged top, I gotta be ready to run like one. So I always took Ghost and Flash, cause nothing says coward like double mobility. But feel free to do whatever you want. Once laning phase ends, that's when the fun actually starts, and you can look around the map to actually be a part of the game. Having lethal tempo and 1 or 2 on-hit items lets you show up out of thin air to stun someone and turn into the card-slinging slasher. I honestly didn't know about his crit scalings, so I never messed around with a build that included crit, but I couldn't stand to play another game of TF top, so if you're gonna play around with it and build crit, let me know how it goes. On to Malcolm Graves. With TF, I felt like he needed a little bit more of an in-depth guide on how his abilities worked for an on-hit build. But Graves is Graves. He's a simple man that has a shotgun, and following video game logic, he's got less range than a man throwing cards. His entire passive is based around his gun. It's essentially a shit ton of math just to say he is one of the few champs in League that has to reload his weapon, and his autos actually fire projectiles. This means that they can actually be blocked or technically dodged. There's some other stuff in there about crit giving you more projectiles and how on hit works, but feel free to read that if you want. The way his autos work makes poking people with them a little difficult if your opponent knows how to stand behind minions. But it makes your wave clear kinda nice. Adding to his wave clear and giving him a bit of poke is Graves' Q, which fires out in a straight line and explodes back in a T-shape doing more damage. If you shoot it into a wall, it'll bounce back instantly. If you angle it correctly, or have someone shoved in against their tower, this can really do some damage. When he uses his W, Graves coughs up a cloud of smoke from his cigar onto his opponent, making them nearsighted within the circle. It also gives a small slow, but not enough to rely on it. Now his E. This ability is actually quite nice for top lane. It's a short dash that reloads a bullet for you and gives you a stack of grit. Grit is a buff that gives you a flat amount of armor for each time you use E, as long as you're in combat with champs. If you feel like you really need to be tankier for any matchup, so long as the opponent's AD, you can go 2 points in his E early and whittle them down while they hit you softer than a stack of wet pancakes. Finally, his R. It's just a giant shotgun blast. It goes out in a straight line, knocks him back, and it explodes into a cone. The cone does a little bit of reduced damage, but it'll still do enough. This ability is great as a finisher in a fight, and it's also a nice tool to help you kite. His kit is perfect to bully the fuck out of melee champs. Or at least, theoretically, that's how it should go. I will admit, I made a mistake while playing him. I didn't do that much damage in lane. I tried to play him like I did in Season 8, with Bork and crit, but Bork's been nerfed a bit on ranged champs in general, and it doesn't provide a bunch of sustain and damage like it used to. So I'd recommend that if you feel the need for sustain and damage, get Fleet Footwork and maybe a Vamp Scepter, then rush Collector. Having crit not only helps you against minion waves with his projectile spread, but if all your pellets hit the enemy, it'll give you a big burst they likely aren't expecting. The Collector's passive could also help you snowball quicker than Kesha on Nunu. Use this to get other crit items, and you'll be able to harass anyone in no time. If you feel like being a real piece of shit, you can take Ignite for some early pressure. I used to do that, but I just took TP. In lane, Graves is pretty susceptible to ganks. So if you play too far up, make sure you at least have good wards. Once you get out of laning phase, all's well that ends well. Graves is Graves. If you've seen him in the jungle, you've seen him in lane, so long as he succeeds. While crit and lethality is probably how you should play Graves if you decide to play him top, there is another way. I played one game where I went a tanky Graves with Grasp and Sundered Sky, and I gotta tell you, it was some of the most fun I've had while making this video. My build, it wasn't perfect, could definitely use some tweaking, but getting Grasp procs with Sundered Sky giving you a guaranteed crit feels so nice. His Q doesn't hit as hard as building lethality and full AD, but man, does it feel good to be hard to kill and doing decent damage while kiting. Slap some proper sustain on this mess, I think you'd have some fun. But with that being said, let's get into the review. I feel like Graves and TF share a lot of the same faults in top. Their damage before items is pretty lackluster, and it can take a lot of gold to get online. Plus, they're both weak to common champs in the top lane like Darius and Garen, and really anyone else that could get on them to do consistent damage. TF used to be pretty damn annoying, but he's been nerfed to prevent his unhealthy playstyle, which I'm grateful for. But because of this, I'm gonna have to put him in the it works category. Graves, on the other hand, is going in the annoying category, because he's kind of just that. Into tanks, he could poke down successfully, but without feeling like he has much kill potential, and he kinda needs that to pop off. I definitely built him like shit, and I maybe built TF like shit, so they could deserve a different ranking. I did not feel like playing any more of them in the top lane. Besides, they're both better off mid anyways. And that's all I got for now. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, please leave a like, or a dislike. Let me know how you felt about the video, any feedback means a lot, and have a good one.